following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Well, welcome to another episode of the Dukes Court. Tonight I'm joined by Chris Slow Trot Fletcher, Gary the Mud Pie Man Kinn, and I'm Waylaid Dave Finoli. How are you guys tonight?
All right, how are you, Waylaid?
I just did a bat flip. I don't know if you could sense it, but after getting that nickname, I had to do a bat flip.
All right. I thought about it, and I thought that would fit you the best, Fletch. Slow trot.
Well, you know, no one in my family has ever been blessed with blazing speed, I'll tell you that.
But you had good power. You hit the last home run in Billy Rainier's wiffle ball field.
No, I parked that one. I should have pointed. I meant to, but I forgot.
Nobody's ever played there since, so.
Flip the bat next time, Fletch.
Oh, man. Well, gentlemen, as we get on, I have a breaking story for you guys. Now, I know this is going to be shocking, but apparently Le'Veon Bell did not sign his tender. I know that's a stunning moment for each of you.
Yeah,
I want you to take a moment to take that in.
He doesn't want his body to get battered too much.
Oh, for God's sake.
I would call that a chicken tender, frankly.
He's a what? Is he?
He's a busher.
He's a busher.
Actually, you know what? I think there's a lot of blame to go around. I really do.
Yeah.
I agree.
But I think bottom line, he got some bad advice. 2 weeks ago, his agent decides to apparently look in the rule book and figure out he could be a free agent. So that doesn't say a lot about the representation you have there.
No.
But also, if the Steelers hadn't put that franchise tag on them again, they could have received draft choices. So there's that part of it. Plus, you know, they offered them a low guarantee. So there's some fault to be had there as well. But, you know, in the long run, I think it's a good thing because there's not going to be a lot of cap space that's going to be spent on the running back position. And now you've got James Conner, who is performing, and he's performing at a fraction of the cost of Le'Veon Bell. So I think it's not a bad thing.
No,
and off-the-field nonsense either. No off-the-field nonsense with this guy.
Correct.
I personally think it galvanized the team. I think in a weird way it kind of brought them together, and you haven't heard a lot of, except for driving 100 miles on McKnight Road, you haven't heard a lot of whiny Steeler, you know, what's going to happen with the soap opera now.
Well, you know, I mean, I don't think he's got the weapons that Bell brings, Connor, but the reality is if Ben keeps getting the other receivers involved, Schuster, even the tight end a little bit, it opens the field up, and that's why Connor's been gaining all these yards. So, I mean, I'm not sure they're winning the Super Bowl, but I'm not sure they're winning the Super Bowl if he was in. But the reality is they probably could go just about as far without him, which is another bad representation that he had from his so-called professionals there, in my view.
I think one thing that makes them Super Bowl contenders is their success rate in the red zone. Touchdowns this year. What is it, 78%?
It's high.
They are number one.
Yep. I mean, that is like almost double what you had last year. And the defense, I mean, I don't know where it's coming from. I know they're doing a lot of different formations in the nickel with safeties. That is all of a sudden working. The things they talked about at the beginning of the season, which was really outside the box. But I'm not saying they're going to win the Super Bowl either, but right now they seem you get the feel like they could be, in my mind, a lot more than last year, because in my mind last year, once Shazier went down, that defense wasn't a Super Bowl defense.
I mean, New England doesn't look unbeatable, and I think Kansas City, you know, Reed will mess the clock up when these big games happen. So, I mean, the field's fairly wide open. I mean, it's not that far-fetched.
No.
So, another reason why, you know, honestly, I would have taken the same position the Steelers organization did. So, I mean, I think the advice is horrible. I mean, what does he think?
Yeah.
Somebody's going to throw him $14 million next year after sitting out another year? Not likely. Not very likely.
He's looking in the 20s, so if he doesn't get it in the 20s, this blew up in his face.
Kind of think it's going to be honest with you. The teams that can afford that are generally good teams on the cusp, but they got a lot of money tied up. So, again, the representation some of these guys get, or whether they listen or not. We don't know what he was told and whether he listened or not. Certainly seems idiotic enough with some of the decision-making off the field and some of the – what did he come there for? That's the part I can't quite figure out. Like, I mean, you know, you can't tell if there's any dialogue or not in these last few weeks, but what did he come up there for? Like, you know, what? Do you think the fans were, you know, some people were just, like, so sweating it out whether or not he was going to come back again, which I don't think any of them were. It's hard to follow what the thinking was to me.
Well, so. It is hard to follow, but I will support an athlete's right to negotiate what he thinks he wants, to do what he wants in the case of business because it's short. What I don't support is when you're kind of stringing your team and your teammates along. Just come out and say, I'm not coming back. Why couldn't he just say that?
I felt that about a month ago. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, you know, this is in the third time he's let his teammates down. So, I mean, that to me that's the sin of what happened here with him. As I said, if he doesn't want to play, if he wants to go for next year, I got no problem with that. But you know, there's a way to do it with honor, and
that's the way I feel. So,
but you know, as we talk about a potential Super Bowl appearance, and the odds that they'll make it, the odds of another team across town of getting in the ACC championship after playing at Notre Dame and 3-4 at that point, 3 of the 4 losses, 2 blowouts to Penn State, what is now a very average Penn State team, and a blowout loss at Central Florida, who has not played well, even though they're undefeated. They've not played well since that game. A loss to a 1-6 North Carolina team. At 3-4, while they played well at Notre Dame, this team had all the makings of just a huge disappointment. It had all the makings of trying to find money to buy Pat Narduzzi's contract out and starting all over again. And a funny thing happened with the confidence I think they got from that Notre Dame game. This team just started taking off. I mean, this feels so much different than the 7-5 and 8-4 Pitt teams of the past, because this is a team that is making every week is finding different ways to win. They're dominating on the offensive line and playing damn well on the defensive line too. This team has all the earmarks now of the way Michigan State used to play, at least when Narduzzi was there. The defense has been, save a little bit against Duke, this defense has been pretty damn good since Notre Dame. And you look at the stats, they're almost video game stats. You have Quadri Olison, who a man who not a lot of people really know, but Tony Dorsett, Swervin Curvin Richards, LaShawn McCoy, James Conner, and Dion Lewis, the only other 5 players in Pitt history who have had multiple 1,000-yard seasons. He has become the 6th with just a phenomenal game. Power, speed, 7.1 average. Darren Hall, 8.8 per carry. He's averaged over 16 yards per carry the last 2 weeks. And that offensive line, it was basically, except for Booker, it was a new offensive line. So, I mean, we haven't had a lot of success over the past 30-some years, ever since Danny Marino put a pass into John Brown's hands to beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl to end the 1981 season. There have been a lot of great moments. There's been huge disappointments every time this team has been on the of winning a championship. You know, they're supposed to win the national championship in '82. Foch Fazio, we find out, is not a good head coach. Seemingly turning the corner in '88 and '89, they get rid of Mike Gottfried and hire Paul Hackett. Paul Hackett takes the program to a depth it had never known before. The only success they had was more by luck, and that was the 2004 Big East championship, where you, Fletch, got to enjoy a Red Sea in the Fiesta Bowl, and an embarrassing bowl game at that.
That was the worst beatdown I think I've ever seen in person.
It was embarrassing. Every time Dave Wanstead had this team in position for a Big East title, it blew up. So this has been what the last 30 years is, and this is what I thought the Virginia Tech game was going to be. I have never seen a more dominant offensive performance, and I just mean a powerful, dominant, I can score on you at will against a team that, while they played tough against, a team that is on an incredible streak of bowl games that will be broken this year. So, I mean, you still, in the back of your head, expect a collapse in the last two games, but something tells me this team has learned how to win. It is not a talented team by any stretch. Those teams I've mentioned over the last 30 years, if you put them on paper, this team is not in the ballpark. I mean, those they had some legitimate top NFL talent on those teams, and that's why they were disappointing. I'm dumbfounded by the turnaround. I mean, I said on this show, this guy could be looking for a new job this year, and he's brought a winning atmosphere to this team. And it's one thing to win games. It's another thing to just power over. They powered over Virginia. They powered over Virginia Tech. They had no business winning the Duke game, and yet they found a way to win the Duke game. Syracuse, 13th team in the nation, and they played right with them and outplayed them. This is my favorite Pittsburgh team. I mean, I love the Pirates. I love baseball. Don't get me wrong, but this Pitt team is the one if I had my choice of any team to see, this Pitt team would be the one I would. And I mean, I'm just myself so excited about what we're seeing this year. Fletch, you certainly have been there with me for quite a few of these disappointments. What are you looking at after seeing what is a tremendous turnaround?
Well, Dave, Gary, it's old-fashioned football that brought Pitt back. It's pounding the ball. Pitt's averaging almost 257 yards on the ground. So you put that over a season, that would be the third best at Pitt since 1970. The only two teams that were better were two Tony Dorsett teams, I think in 75 and 76. And here's the other thing. This is the part that just blows my mind. It's 73% more than last year's average. So the running game is taking all the pressure off of their quarterback. Consider this. That offense put up 654 yards against Virginia Tech and 634 against Duke. When you run the ball and everyone on the other side of the scrimmage knows you're going to run it, it's pretty will-sapping, I will tell you that. And this largely has been the reason that your team is going to be playing in the AFC Conference Championship. That, and, they've got some pretty good senior leadership, too. And, you guys know I love the hidden stats, but here's one you just can't hide. Pitt averaged 13.9 yards per play against Virginia Tech. That's the most of any team since 2005. Here's some other things for you to chew on. Virginia Tech forced a 3-and-out right after halftime. Other than that, the Hokies did not hold Pitt to any real drives of fewer than 50 yards. Pitt scored 5 of its touchdowns on drives of less than 2.5 minutes. So the Hokies, while giving up all those points, still possessed the ball for 34 minutes and ran 86 plays to Pitt's 47. And Pitt rolled up all those. Here's the other thing. If you watch that game, Virginia Tech had 8 guys in the box, and they still couldn't stop the run. But, I'm going to go back with you, Dave, before we get too excited. This is Pitt, and they're good at setting us up for those crushing losses in big games. But, even with the ACC, it's not the best competition. I'm hopeful that they're not going to lay an egg against Wake Forest. Then it's on to Miami. And if that goes through, at the appearance in that title game. And, Dave, you and I, we laughed at Pat Narduzzi when he said this would happen, especially after that Penn State, debacle that you talked about. But, here's the thing about his teams. They do tend to get better as the season progresses. But still, this is pretty remarkable.
This is. And you mentioned about the 257 yards a game. Look at where they were after Central Florida. I don't even think they were, if I'm not mistaken, I might be wrong, but I think they were around 100 yards a game 4 games into the season. I mean, wow. I was speechless. I was working, unfortunately, that night, but I got the chance Monday morning to watch that game. And my jaw was open the whole time. I mean,
when the other team knows you're going to run the ball,
right,
and they still can't stop it.
And don't give me that bullshit. They were trying. Well, there's some injuries on. Everybody has injuries at this point of the year. If you don't have the depth to overcome the injuries, you suck. I mean,
but they were opening up holes downfield. Their fullbacks were blocking. I mean, it was a clinic on how to run the ball.
Oh man, and that 97-yard run at the end was just. I mean, crushing the one guy who runs into the other guy and takes him out. I mean, so happy for Olesen. What a good kid, intelligent kid, and at this pace, he looks like he could sneak into 5th place on the all-time Pitt rushing record if he. I mean, you figure he has 3 more games, and he will sneak up on 3,000 yards at this point if he has a couple more good games. I'm trying to look this up here, but right now, if he has a little over, he just snuck over Curtis Martin. So if he gets safely, let's say he gets 300 yards the next 320 yards, that puts him at Craig Hayward level for his career. Who the hell would have thought? I mean, you never heard this kid. He does his job. He doesn't create a Le'Veon Bell kind of scene, and he's quietly been one of the great rushers in Pitt history.
Very quietly, but he'll be playing in the NFL. Yeah,
certainly looking like he's going to get a shot now.
Yeah, and Darren Hall could play in the NFL too.
Yep.
I mean, yep. Let's not take out Kenny Pickett.
Those guys.
I get a little irritated at Kenny Pickett getting so criticized. I mean, he manages that offense well. He's quietly had a nice season. Once they started against Notre Dame, that's the thing to me that made the difference in this offense all of a sudden. Is against Notre Dame, he started going down the middle more, and he was finding success. Up until then, you were hitting sideline to sideline. The coaches were not giving him an opportunity to succeed. But, I mean, right now he's at 60%, 9 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He's throwing for about, 1,300 yards. So, throwing for about 138 in this. And he looked accurate as hell last week on some long passes. So I think Kenny Pickett is just confident. He borders on cocky, but you know what? When you need to get the job done, he gets the job done. Now, Gary, he's a New Jersey guy.
Yep.
From your part of the woods. Have you gotten to enjoy a lot of this Pitt season out there?
I mean, I'm as stunned as anybody. I mean, when you think back to that September 8th game or whatever with Penn State, and the offense looked completely lost, confused. They didn't run the ball at all, and Pickett, he was running out of the pocket the second he snapped the ball. Weren't throwing the ball around all over the place, weren't spraying it around to receivers. I mean, 15 different guys have caught balls for the Panthers. I mean, that's more than pro football. So, that's remarkable. And I think that, I don't know, obviously this offensive line's a lot better than they started out. They always say that it takes those guys time to gel. But, obviously they're doing that. And I mean, those numbers are are staggering. 13 yards a play and 2 guys averaging over 7 yards a rush. I mean, I think the most catches is, Lopez has 22. And they got French with 18, Mack with 16, and then they're scattered around about 10 or 11 other guys. So they're keeping the defense off balance, and when they're keeping the defense off balance, they'll power it right through you up the middle. And, I'm not sure if or not, but, he's certainly doing what you need to do now. If you can run the ball like this, and you control the line of scrimmage like that, and spraying the ball around for 6 yards a pass, what's wrong with that? That might be a way to beat somebody with the athletes that Clemson is, too. You're not going to, you may not be able to power through them like you did with Virginia Tech or even Syracuse or Virginia even in that, Virginia's another game that I think nobody expected them to win and they won it.
Right.
And, I think if they can spread the ball around like this and widen the field and then pound Olison and Hall in there, which to me give you 2 different looks as well. I'm not sure they're going to beat Clemson or not, but I don't think it's going to be the walkover anybody would have predicted a couple months ago. So
you're saying
the offensive line's been sensational. The defensive line has been excellent. They got teams totally off balance, and they can run you over. And I don't know. I don't think the athletes are much different at this level of college sports either. So, that confidence thing, belief in the coaching staff and the belief in each other and stuff like that, you got to feel pretty good. Although for some reason there's just a part of me. Was it last year Miami came in there was close to some bowl games and Pitt dumped there? Was that 2 years ago or last year? I can't remember.
It was last year.
But you just hope that, that's never been an easy place to play down there in November because it could be raining like hell or it could be hotter than people were used to. Not real worried about Wake Forest, honestly, but that Miami game, it's just, it just worries me a little bit because although Miami's lost 4 straight, they were pretty highly regarded before the season started, although similar to me, honestly, Penn State and even Notre Dame a little bit still. Miami looked a little bit overrated in the beginning of the year, and now it showed that they were. But they also got some damn good athletes and stuff. So, yeah, with Pitt football, you guys have paid a lot more attention to it over the last 30 years than I have. But, yeah, there is always some kind of disappointment. You hope you just don't go down there, and all of a sudden a couple Miami athletes return a punt or an interception or something like that, and then it goes for naught. I don't really think so this time, but there is that little bit of tinge of worry. But, again, full credit to Narduzzi, the rest of his coaching staff, particularly the line coaches. And I agree. It's funny. Olison does everything the way you want to do it, as opposed to what the Steelers are going through. And the kid, I didn't realize he was that high in the the historical level, but his last 4 or 5 games have just been beautiful to watch. So, and they've beaten. They're going to get a good bowl game anyway, even if they don't go to the ACC title, because they've beaten 3 ranked teams: Syracuse, Virginia Tech. And they play competitive against Clemson. They're going to get a pretty good bowl game. They could be playing damn near New Year's Day anyway at this point. So
you're making one hell of a they're going to beat Clemson. Is that what you're hearing, Fletch?
I don't think they are. I don't honestly think they are. If I'm saying that, I shouldn't be coming across that way. But I don't think it's going to be the walkover we would have predicted back October 1st, though, either. So, the one way to beat those powerhouses is to keep them off balance. And nobody's been able to do that with Alabama. And I got to believe, Clemson's had some questions at the quarterback position. For how much more I've followed it this year just because we're doing this kind of work. They have some question marks there. But they still got a ton of athletes all over the field, particularly on defense. If Pitt can run the ball up the middle and then they can spray the ball around like this, that offensive line control the line of scrimmage, I think the game's going to be a lot more competitive than a lot of people thought it would have been 6 weeks ago. So, if they can get there. I am worried about November 24th, though, just because that's just not – a lot of people have gone down there. Notre Dame went down there about 30 years ago, was ready to play in the – whatever the hell it was, Cotton Bowl or Sugar Bowl or something. Miami murdered them, 58-20 or something like that. That was under Jerry Faust, who was a fool. But I remember that happening, and it just seems like that happens a little bit more in Miami. So you hope this time – hopefully Narduzzi's got full control of this, and the confidence level of these guys is so high they get down there and do what they're supposed to do.
Well, that's
in a great year.
If they get through Wake Forest, that and do it fairly confidently, that'll speak volumes to what this team's attitude is like right now. Because this is the kind of game. I mean, they just defeated North Carolina State, so it's not a bad team, and I'm kind of happy they did that because that'll at least make Pitt take this game a little more seriously than they might have.
Yep.
Fletch, could this, if they win these final two games, could this be the best Pitt team since the Marino era?
Well, I think you can certainly make that argument. Definitely. And again, the thing about Narduzzi is his teams get better as the year goes along. And they're always good for one upset a year, it seems. Whether it was Clemson the other year, a couple of years ago, or it was Miami last year. Who knows? But the thing that I'm liking about this is this could be a real boon for recruiting.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
It's something they need. And you look at that, just where just got the breaking news. Alabama first, Clemson second, Notre Dame third, Michigan fourth in the college football playoff polls as we're talking about that. But I you look at Penn State with their 4- and 5-star recruits, and they have certainly, since they blew that game against Ohio State, that's been a borderline bad team. 15th in the nation only because they're part of the boys club. Once you're in there in the Power Fives, it seems like you're stuck in there no matter what. Even Virginia Tech, after losing several embarrassing games, was still 24th at one point. I mean, Franklin's team has not played better as the year has gone on.
No.
I mean, for all the talent they supposedly had, they have really, and you got to wonder if he lost the team after that Ohio State game. And that's one thing, as you said, Fletch, Narduzzi, they get better. They get better. And, I mean, this to me is probably the funnest I've had with Pitt in ages, and just looking so forward to that game this Saturday, and hoping in the back of your mind you're still going to have those thoughts. But if they come out and win by 2-3 touchdowns against Wake Forest, this is a different team, and most importantly, if he gets a winning attitude, because that means so much, especially in a building program in any team. The winning attitude means so much. Michigan State has always survived on talent that isn't of a level of Michigan, Ohio State. But you get the attitude, you learn how to win, you focus on winning. That means so much in college sports.
I think it does. I mean, that's what I see. I mean, that's what I see here, Dave. I mean, I think they're clearly functioning as a unit, all departments. It doesn't appear obstacles are bothering them. And I think with this level of athlete, it's pretty close. That's what it looks like to me, too. I completely agree with you. So, yeah.
Oh, man. Now,
I think it's been a fun season because it's had shifting tides, like I always say. I mean, sports are fun when you got shifting tides. I mean, that Penn State game, we all were kind of signing off like, well, they're pretty awful. And I didn't think Penn State was that good. I thought Penn State was lucky to beat Appalachian State the week earlier. They had a ton of problems with that speed on the outside. And then, there's two losses to North Carolina and UCF. UCF, they really weren't in the game, which a team which I think way overrated despite their carpings to the contrary because of that conference. But then you grip off those 4 wins in a row against some pretty good teams. I mean, teams that were pretty good, pretty well regarded, and you whip off and you do it in such a dominance. I mean, it's like kids football, 8.8 yard per rush, 7.1 yard per rush. I mean, it's like something you'd see in Pee-wee football. So
I look forward to the college Stratomatic college football season next year.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And Duquesne too. I mean, Duquesne's had a good year too. Another one, similar to Pitt. Struggled early, and here they are late on a good roll late. So
yes, they have. Yes, they
Same
certainly
thing.
have.
Yep.
But they're doing it without Hall of Fame talent. This is going to be a good segue here. As we talk about next. Did you like that? Did you like that segue?
Very good.
Well played.
Johnny Carson, Ed McMahon like.
Well, we're going to talk about today's game era ballots for the Hall of Fame. In my mind, kind of a weak a weak ballot. I figure we'll go through and talk about this, and we'll all give our yays or nays. We'll start with Harold Baines. You know, a guy who's a Don Sutton kind of candidate. Never really a dominant, he's the best in the game kind of a guy. But over the course of a long career, 22 years, he's fell just short of 3,000 hits, 134 short. Almost 1,700 RBIs. Six-time All-Star. 384 homers. Decent player. In my mind, not a good enough player to be a Hall of Fame player. Stretched out his career on the coattails of a DH. And other than being the two-time Designated Hitter of the Year award, I'm not sure, this guy comes anywhere near in my mind. If I'm looking at it, I'd rather have a Dave Parker, who at times was the most dominant player in the game, than a Harold Baines. Gary, what do you think of Harold Baines?
I mean, that's funny. I would say yes for him. Whether you love the DH or hate it, which I don't love it, never did. He didn't play the field very much. I mean, half of his games were at the DH slot. But, he was kind of one of the prototypical ones you want in that position. And I don't know, 21 years, 2,900 hits, 1,700 RBIs, which is a lot more than some of the other people on this ballot. The 384 homers is a little low, but he hit a consistent 290. And he was a guy you didn't necessarily want to see with the game on the line up there. I mean, I think there's a lot of borderline in a lot of these classes lately, and I would agree. I think Parker was far more dominant. If I had to choose between him and Parker, I would put him in. But on this ballot, I would pick Baines over a number of the others, and it's primarily just because he was very consistent from the time he came up in 1982. No matter what team he played on, he was generally a third to sixth hitter in the order. A lot of RBIs, 32nd all time. That's a high number. Most important statistic to me. And last but not least, guy never besmirched the sport in any way, like a few of the other people on this thing. Yeah. So, to me, I would actually give him the nod. A lot of guys that don't have the career that's in a winning organization or a lot of postseasons never get a fair shake to me. But you look at his body of work over a long period, 2,900 games too. I mean, you look at his body of work over that 21-year period of time. I would actually give him the yes, as opposed to 324
postseason hitter.
I'm sorry?
A 324 postseason hitter, so that kind of goes.
Wasn't in the postseason very often, but when he was in
it, series, but still, when you play better in the postseason than you do in the regular season, that says something about it. So,
I mean,
Harold Baines, Mr. Fletcher.
Hall of Fame induction should be consistency over a long period of time. Now, consistency at 220 doesn't mean anything, but this guy's not 220. And there really is very little – there was very few bad years in there, and there was a ton of consistent years in there. So, to me, I would actually give him the thumbs up.
All right. Break the tie, Mr. Fletcher.
Well, let me just say this. I'm not sure why, but this whole topic brings out the bitter in me. And that's never pretty. This seems to be a colossal waste of time for players of the era involved with this. I'm not excited about this list. I'd rather sit through bad infomercials and Paul Anka's having my baby turned up to 10 than get on board with this. So, my rat's ass meter is reading really, really low on this. But I'm going to say this. Gary, you made a very persuasive argument. My initial thing was to say no way on Baines, but you have me considering it now. So kudos to you, Gary.
All right. So you're considering
besmirching his career. No rumors of steroid use.
No. I mean, a boring ball player, not an exciting ball player.
I agree.
But steady and consistent, and you're right. I mean, Gary, you had a hell of an argument there. I'm with you.
Yep.
But I want to just throw out one thing before we get further on this list. I want to talk about some omissions. I mean, the best candidate was left off that ballot is Mark McGwire, and it's a shame it's come to this. The Hall of Fame, his Hall of Fame case has pretty much been torpedoed, by people thinking that the steroids are those magic pills. Especially now, you're going to have these guys. Most of them are going to be veterans, and so former baseball players, so they're not going to be on board with this whole steroids thing. But meanwhile, they're the ones who were popping greenies in their day. So again, you can feel my bitterness coming. You can feel it.
I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. So we'll say that Harold Baines on this. I mean, I'm always been an anti the Don Sutton candidate, only because these guys were good players throughout their careers, and I went great. And I tend to agree with you 9 times out of 10 on these lists, because you've had 15 years to vote these guys in.
Yeah.
Or 10 or whatever. I guess it's 10 now. It used to be 15. But, what new information is going to come up that somehow makes them more palatable to be in? I mean, to me, Harold Baines was a good player. He was a very good player, but, I went great. But Mr. Rainier would agree with you, too. He's very much in Harold Baines' corner. And I certainly understand the argument. My guy has to have been one of the top 5 players in the game at one point to be considered a Hall of Famer. But
let me throw 2 more omissions on there too, and let me just say that I wouldn't vote for either one of them. But if I'm looking at this list that came out, I mean, Brett Saberhagen and David Cohn were notable omissions. Not that, like I said, not that I would vote for either of them. Cohn I thought was a weasel-faced shit, and Saberhagen, but still, you look at their stats compared to the other guys on this list, I think that's an omission.
I would agree.
Both had dominant stretches. They did.
Yeah, I would agree. But and the next guy up, certainly with your McGuire argument, is a quizzical guy on this list. Albert called me Joey Bell. Certainly a guy that I enjoyed when the Canton Akron Indians were playing in Canton. This guy, I got to see him many times, and he was a stud, no doubt. But he's got some great stats to put in if you're just looking at the stats. 5-time Silver Slugger. Certainly one of the considered one of the great power hitters in his day. Only player to do 50-50 in doubles home runs in a season. Slugging percentage 13th best. But how do you put him in? And I know he's not on. He was prior to the Mitchell report, and but if I don't know that this guy was on steroids, but looking at the rage of him, looking at again the other his contemporaries that were proven to be on him, I'm not saying he doesn't deserve in because of that. I kind of fly in the wind about the whole steroid thing, whether they belong in or not. But how do you put him in essence, before Barry Bonds gets in? Barry Bonds twice the player.
I don't think
it's a flawed candidate in my.
Yep.
I love the Indians. He was, an asshole, but he was certainly somebody I love to watch play. I mean, he was just a wonderful hitter to watch. But I just don't know how you make him a Hall of Famer before you make Barry Bonds
or others.
Yeah,
even others.
Fletch, I know you're bitter. But tell me what you think of Albert Bell in this one.
If Bain gets points for longevity, I think Bell loses points for lack of longevity. I mean, he played 10 years, which I guess is sort of like he had 2 other years that he might have played like 70-some games in. He can match the ball, but, Dave, you get on a slippery slope by trying to say, okay, this person did or this person did not take steroids. We don't know. And certainly some of the pitchers that he was facing, did they or did they not? So, I mean, you can't, unless there's proof, you can't bring it up. You just can't.
But that's what I'm saying. How do you? I just don't know how you have him on the list. The 10-year thing is a great thing also, because his numbers really don't match up with Hall of Famers if you're just looking at that.
Plus, he was surly as the day was long too. So he's going to lose some support there.
Yeah. So I'm a little dumbfounded he's on here. Gary?
I mean, a lot of these guys that, and again, it's all speculation. So if he's listening, he probably sues us. But it's all speculation.
Absolutely.
A lot of these guys that clearly pump that stuff, from Caminiti, who's dead and can't verify it, to Gagne, to this guy, their hips went almost immediately after they got off it. Yeah. And Bell when he went to Chicago, he was damaged goods already. Couldn't run anymore, because his hips went. And, honestly, I don't think you have to be a good guy. Anybody before 1920 probably gambled away half the money they made and everything else. I mean, this isn't a popularity contest, but he was a royal jerk. That stuff with Hannah Storm, everything with the rest of the press, charging a mound all the time, anytime somebody threw the ball in the inside half. And honestly, I was going to say the same thing Fletch did. His career was really short. Yeah, he was dominant for a couple years, but his career was 10 years. Even in those 10 years, a couple of them weren't so good. So no chance to me. To me, longevity does matter. This guy didn't have it. He was, he doesn't belong even on this. And you're right. If the slippery slope, I agree with Fletcher on all fronts. If you're not going to put the best player in the era, Bonds, or a guy like Sosa who had a ton of homers and could run the bases and play the field. I mean, I got some issues with McGuire because I don't really think, despite his popularity, he had a bunch of seasons where he hit damn near 200.
True.
He got a Gold Glove, which was a gift to me. I mean, I'm not a big fan of his, but if you can't consider some of those guys because of that speculation or Clemens, this guy shouldn't be anywhere near within Cooperstown.
But here's the thing, and I've done a 360 on it. I'm not happy with what went on in the era, but I've done a 360 on it. You have to consider you can't tell who was on it, who wasn't.
Cannot.
You listen to these people. A minority apparently weren't on it, but you have to just consider the stats of the era at this point. If you're talking greatness in the game. Other than that, you're pulling out O.J. Simpson from Canton. You're pulling out Ty Cobb from Cooperstown. I mean, it's a museum that's honoring the greats of the game. And, I think in this situation, I mean, I guess I'm scared. If you're going to elect somebody into the Hall of Fame from the era, you got to elect the best player from the era before you get any of these other guys in. And no, you don't know Albert Bell did it. You don't know 99% of these guys if they did it or not. I mean, you could just go from what's been said about it, but you don't have any significant proof. Albert Bell, in my end, it's twofold. Again, if you're going to start putting players in the era, start with the best. And second of all, he does not have the stats to be a Hall of Famer. He does not have the stats to be a Hall of Famer. You have to be a Sandy Koufax kind of guy, where you are by far the best in the game over a short period of time, in my eyes, if you're going to be considered for the Hall of Fame. And Albert Bell was one of the best players in the game. He did not have a legendary peak that is Sandy Koufax. Sandy Koufax to me is what you look for when you're, or Gale Sayers, what you look for when you're trying to get a Hall of Famer in who didn't play a long period of time. Those guys were the best in the game. During that short period of time. And, whether Albert Bell did steroids or not, I don't know, but that's where I say no on both accounts.
I mean, I'm not making a steroid argument either, gentlemen, just so you understand. I just think my feeling about him is beyond just a bad individual. Really hurt the game in a lot of ways. Take that even away. It's too short. I mean, he really had 8 good years. And in an era that...
He did have the corked bat affair, too, so we do have some proof of cheating.
He did. But you're right. If you're going to start with that, you're going to take away all this. I think the writers are full of shit anyway with all this speculating who was on and who was on. That was the era in baseball history, period. Start with Bonds, then work your way backwards and leave it at that.
Especially if you're going to put Piazza in, who certainly had been mentioned in certain things. So you were one of the ones that have brought me around, Fletch. You were one of the ones that have brought me around to my way of thinking. So.
Well, it's it's a difficult topic. It really is, especially for a game that's predicated on numbers.
Yep. Well, I remember standing at the steps of Cooperstown, dropping a blue pill, and Viv screaming at me, "You're juicing." You're juicing.
I thought that was Larry David. Maybe it was you.
It might have been me. One of the great episodes of Curb Your Enthusiasm. Now, the next guy comes up again. Why the hell is he on the list? In my eyes, Joe Carter. One of the great home runs in the history of the World Series. Good RBI man, 10 consistency, 100 RBIs in 10 seasons, but comes up with 1,400, 396 homers. A very good player. In my mind, not even in the Harold Baines category. I mean, one of the good players in his era, but I never looked at him and thought this is one of the top 5 players in baseball at any given time. So again, I say no to. His most impressive stat is his 100 RBIs in 10 seasons. I think only, what is it here? Let me look this up. 17. I was going to say 17 other players in history got to that level. But again, very good player, not a Hall of Famer. Gary.
I'm with you. I mean, Carter was a good guy. You know, in good teams, he was an effective straw that stirred the drink on some good teams like those Toronto teams. I don't think he did have some consistency for that period of time with driving in those runs in the 90s, but didn't really have a position. And he doesn't have the longevity of Baines. A lot of RBIs, that's impressive. I mean, I think you'll probably see him come back around again. But my initial reaction is no, certainly not one of the dominant players in the era, and did not have the consistency of the first guy we talked about. To me, So,
Fletch.
He hit under 260. So he had a walk-off homer to win a World Series, but he was no match. He was a shitty fielder. Get him out. Not even close. Not even close. Waste of time.
Why is he on the
Next.
list? Why is he on the list?
there.
What are your personal favorites, Fletch? Will the Thrill Clark. Great fielder. 6-time All-Star game. Was an MVP. But again, this guy, to me, doesn't have the stats over the course of his career to even make me wonder why the hell are you on this list. A 303 hitter, so a little bit better hitter than some of the others, but again, in the very good. I don't know that I ever sat down and looked at him, and whereas a couple years he was in the top 5 in the league, especially 89, there weren't enough of those seasons for Will Clark. And I again don't even consider him a worthwhile candidate. Fletch?
He's a better fielding Carlos Delgado is really what he is.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned that 89 season. I mean, I've never seen anyone have, except for Barry Bonds that one year, anyone have a better postseason than he did, even though, I mean, he just hit the shit out of the ball that season. He basically carried that team to the World Series. But I would agree. He's not Hall of Fame worthy.
Yeah. Gary?
Good fielder, good average hitter. He was a guy you didn't want to see with a game on the line, not just that postseason. Even that 93 run, against the Braves, which they got outlasted. I mean, he was great in September. He played the game hard, but that's not a criterion. He did have a lot of power. Not close to me. Played the game hard, seemed like a decent guy, clutch hitting kind of guy, but not enough, and not enough seasons either. No, not on my ballot. Not for entry.
All right. You got Oral Hershiser. On the positive end, a great postseason pitcher. 88, he was probably, in my mind, the reason. Kirk Gibson certainly had a great year that year, but he was the reason they were in the World Series and won the World Series. I remember that 95 Indians team. He certainly was the emotional leader and had a hell of a postseason with them. Certainly 8-3, 2.5 ERA in the series. But in 18 seasons, he won 204 games. That's a little over 10 a year. And while that might be a little more impressive in today's ball, back then, not as impressive. The main thing I'll give him, other than the postseason kudos, is the fact that he probably had a better peak than most of these guys in here. But again, wasn't a peak where I looked at him and anywhere for a year or two thought that this guy was one of the great pitchers of all time. So again, I give him a resounding no. Although I will say, this is probably the guy that might sneak in there on the vote. I just have a weird thought that he might be the guy to sneak in. Gare, but one of your
I don't know. I think this is going to be one of the more interesting ones, Dave, because it's funny. A lot of people, and I'm not saying this because he's a Dodger either, where he spent a lot of his peak years, but a lot of people thought Valenzuela was the far better pitcher. But if you look at it over the long period of time, Hershiser did have those 18 years, whereas Valenzuela did not.
Yeah. And
he was a tremendous postseason pitcher. I mean, the one thing about him that I thought was he could start and relief, and not just during that 88 run, or even before that, like in 86, and then even a little bit later on with the Dodgers. I mean, he could give you a lot different ways. I think he's borderline, but I think he's going to get it. And I think he's going to get it primarily because of going back to statistical analysis. Yeah, he did play 17 years. He wasn't a starter all those years, particularly in the beginning and the end. And he won 204. He only lost 150. Yeah. So, and I think people have a tendency to fall in love with those records. His 59 scoreless innings or whatever it was to break Drysdale's record, and that 88 postseason. I think he's going to be damn close, and I think he's going to get it. But he's funny. He rubs the press the wrong way, and he did when he was a pitcher, too. So this is going to be a very interesting one, but it's nothing to do with the fact he's a Dodger. I think he was mediocre at best. I mean, Lasorda shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame either. That's ridiculous to me. But the worst thing that he did was he burned out guys, and he really burned out Hershiser and Valenzuela beyond belief in the 80s. And I think Hershiser probably would have piled a little bit more if he wasn't overworked so much on that mediocre Dodger team in that couple-year stretch.
Right.
But I think he's probably going to get the nod because of the 204 wins, only the 150 losses. He could start or relieve, and quite frankly, on the strength of that one postseason. But he was actually pretty good before that, from 85 on up to that point. He was pretty good after that for a year or two, too. After that, he just became a veteran that, like on those Cleveland teams and stuff where he was kind of a stabilizing force. But I think I'd probably vote for him primarily because of some of that those postseasons, and I think the 204 wins, because we're just not going to see that anymore. It certainly doesn't. No pitcher. This pitching argument's going to go on year after year when we do this because nobody's going to pile up those kind of numbers. He's one of the last ones we're going to see for a while to get 200 wins. I think this is going to be a very close vote, but I think he's going to get the nod, Dave. I really do.
I think he's going to get voted in. I don't know that I'd put him in. I wouldn't put him in, but I do agree with you on that. Fletch, one of your favorites.
Well, I have to say, I was living there during that 88 season, and I saw him pitch 4 or 5 times that year, and he was absolutely Gibson-esque that year. It was unbelievable.
Yep.
And you're right, the postseason. And the other thing about him, guys, is that man was a competitor. I mean, Lasorda called him Bulldog.
Yeah, it was. That's a great name for him.
It was a good name for him. I'm conflicted on this one, guys. I could go either way on it. I think that one of the other things that I think should give him a point or two is I thought he was a hell of a baseball analyst. So I'm going to give him a couple points for that, and I'm going to push him over the edge because of his ability to be an analyst.
Yeah, he's good.
He's good. He's good. I like it. Yep. So he's in. I'm not a fan in any way, shape, or form of Lee Smith. I thought several times in clutch moments when Mariano Rivera would dominate as a reliever and bring his team to a clutch victory, Lee Smith choked. And, 478 saves, and my thought of saves are it's probably the most ridiculous stat important stat in baseball. I like to look more at what their whip is as they come in there to judge how effective these guys are. Lee Smith, a great pitcher, no ifs, ands, or buts. I just don't look at him as a Hall of Famer. I'm more apt to put a kicker in the NFL Hall of Fame than I would be to put a reliever in. So you have to be an exceptional reliever to be in there. A guy that comes in and it'll pitch one or two innings, that doesn't really excite me as far as the Hall of Fame. Fletch?
It's funny. Coming into this discussion, he was the one I thought was the most saleable of all of them. If you look at his numbers, they compare pretty favorably to Trevor Hoffman, to Bruce Sutter, and Rollie Fingers. So,
yep.
But, I agree with you, Dave. The save is like the most overrated of all the stats. I don't know. There were times when he was the best reliever in the game, but you're right. He would also wilt in the big games. So I'm going to change my yes to a no based upon Dave. You convinced me.
All right. Mr. Gare.
I think that statistic is overrated a great deal. It's a statistic probably should be looked at over time. I think he may continue. I guess he's at the end of his run here after he retired, so he'd have to go into the old timers vote or whatever, and he may end up getting in someday. But he does not have the. He didn't even have it for a short period of times like Gagne did or some other guys. He had a lot of saves. A lot of average teams at best. Generally during the postseason, he was not good. And he was not lights out like Bruce Sutter or Eckersley for a stretch, or even, Hoffman played a lot of bad teams too, but when he came in, the game was pretty much over. And particularly Rivera in the postseason. This was not the case with Lee Smith. He seemed like a decent guy. 478 saves is up there. He did have a lot of longevity, so I don't mean to contradict myself versus Baines, but for that role, for you to get in the Hall of Fame, for me, based upon your relieving role, you got to be lights out. And Smith was not that. So this is a case where statistics really don't tell the tale to me. He was pretty good. I didn't feel as good when he came in. I don't think a lot of writers are going to, versus some of the guys that are in there like Hoffman and Rivera. So I think he's going to miss again, and he's going to have to go into the people re-looking at this from the old timers or whatever, I think. But I think he doesn't belong there. So my vote would be no.
Now, we'll take the next three, the managers. You got Davey Johnson, you got Charlie Manuel, and you got Sweet Lou Piniella. The guy who's the odd man out here, to me, would be Charlie Manuel. Great manager, don't get me wrong. Didn't manage enough. He won his World Series, but I don't think there's enough of a resume in there to put this guy when you've managed as I don't want to make it seem like he managed 2 or 3 years, but he was not a great manager with the Indians and the Phillies. He certainly had his run with. He was okay with the Phils, but he won 1,000 games, and to me, if you're going to win 1,000 games and get in the Hall of Fame, you better be a multiple World Series winner, and he was not. So a very good manager, but not a Hall of Famer. To me, Davey Johnson, is the best of the group. A guy who won just about wherever he went. He won a World Series with the Mets in '86. He has a .562 winning percentage. He's 2 managers of the year. He has a 12th best winning percentage. Certainly there was a guy I always thought when he's managing a team, you're going to be better than what your team might be from a potential standpoint. Lou Piniella could be the Don Sutton of this group, but on this end, to me he has enough of a resume, even as a player to boot, to kind of push him over the top. 23 years as a manager. He wins his world championship on a Reds team that certainly, if you look at him on paper, had no business winning a world championship. But he did win that. Certainly over 1,800 wins, which is, one of the top 16th all time, which is certainly impressive. Wins 116 games with the Mariners. Wins 3 Manager of the Year awards. Not that he's being considered as a player, but certainly 2-time world champion there, 291, or hits 291. Has a long career there, but again, not the reason you put him in. I mean, he's not a Hall of Fame player by any stretch of the imagination, but if you're winning 1,800 games, you've won a world championship, you've led a team to 116 wins, and that Mariner team was a very good team, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't a 116 win team, American League record. I put him in. So these are the 2 people I put into the Hall of Fame on this list, is Davey Johnson and Lou Piniella. Gare.
I'm not there on Johnson. I think he did win a world title with the Mets. He was a pretty good player, too, in the 70s as a second baseman. I thought he struggled quite a bit as a manager in L.A., and particularly in Washington, as he was there at the end of his career.
He struggled in the postseason, but he had pretty good regular seasons.
I mean, I'm not, I think he's somebody that deserves consideration. I mean, 1,375 wins or whatever he had. To me, I'm not sure yet. I mean, the way things are going, again, down the road, he's probably going to look awful good versus what we're seeing in baseball now with the business situation and stuff like that. But to me, Piniella's the one that I'm voting in. And there's a lot of reasons. Beyond the 1,800 wins is a ton. If it's 22 seasons or whatever, I think he finished first or second 11 or 12 times. 3 managers a year. I mean, that Cincinnati team, particularly in the field, was not a great team. Had some big personalities to manage that bullpen, some jerks like Dibble and Myers. He got them in order. Charlton, too. The big season in Seattle. He struggled in Tampa, which was his hometown. Of course, that was an expansion team. But remember, he came to the Cubs, too, and he won there, too, at the end of his career.
Yes.
So, I mean, to me, I think Piniella has the best resume of this group. Johnson, I'm not ready to say yes. Piniella, I am ready to say yes, because I think his teams that he had, the majority of those teams, were not top-flight teams. He got the most out of them. He piled up all those wins. And generally, when he took over a team, you were going to be in a better contention than you were before he was there, other than Tampa. Yeah. So, to me, Piniella gets the nod along with Hershiser and Baines. Johnson, I'm certainly not willing to throw him in the garbage, but I'm not really sure I'm sold on him. I mean, he was kind of a stand and wait for things to happen, too. Didn't see him adjust like Piniella did and some other managers did with the teams they had. Piniella's my vote. Of the 3. Manuel, not even close. Nice guy. I'm not sure a good manager, Dave. A guy that can relate to the players. Certainly really burned out bullpen after bullpen here. Another guy sit and wait for things to happen often. Nice guy, great guy, funny guy. Not Hall of Fame in any way, shape, or form. Not even close. So,
Fletch.
Listen, guys, if you're going to honor a baseball lifer like a Piniella or Dave Johnson, where's Jim Leland in this conversation?
Yeah. No, agreed. Absolutely
agree with that.
Leland should be considered.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to. Why isn't he? Is it because he just did he retire in 12? Is that why?
I don't know, but I mean, I would think that maybe that's it. I don't know.
Leland's better than retired. So.
But I mean, Charlie Manuel to me is an odd choice. That's a big no. Piniella, I guess. I mean, he always had his teams in contention. He did bring a team to a World Series that probably didn't deserve to. And on the other hand, Dave Johnson had that great Mets team that the Dodgers knocked out that year.
The 88 team. Yeah. That's a good point.
So, I mean, I would think that he's a great manager, don't get me wrong. A bit of a jag-off, no question about that. But I don't think he's a Hall of Famer.
Okay.
I'd rather see Dick Williams, for God's sake.
Yeah, I agree. Or Leland, as you say.
Williams was my favorite manager of all time.
Yep.
Although, and I think Bobby Valentine should get a vote just for wearing a false mustache on the dugout and getting kicked out of the game. That, to me, friends, is Hall of Fame worthy.
That certainly was. Now, the last guy on here, I unless you are an owner who has done something to change the game, and other than being an ass and throwing around a lot of money, I'm not sure what Steinbrenner did to change the game. So it's not that he won. He obviously won there, but he also kind of forced some things that were counterproductive to winning championships at times. You certainly have to remember it was him getting suspended from the game for a few years that allowed the Yankees not to trade away some of their valued parts of the farm system that led to their great success in the mid to early 90s. So to me, that takes away from any candidacy he may have. But again, unless an owner has done something to change the game, and people can say, well, he began the free agent, blah, 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 this or that. I don't look at that. Throwing around money isn't, to me, something you look at, well, that changed the game. Might have changed the game, don't get me wrong, but, it wasn't a talent that he necessarily did that. So I'm a huge no on George Stein, or basically any owner of getting in. Fletch.
That's a big no for me. Here's the thing I think that he did, though, guys. He made the Yankees relevant again. Because if you remember when he bought that team, they were rudderless, and they were that was a bad franchise. But and I know he's not on the list, and I'm going to sound like again, I'm bitter. I know he's not on the running for the list, but if you're going to do someone who's a non-player, Marvin Miller needs to go in before any of these asshats that they're talking about there.
Yep.
And in terms of players, I go back to Tony Oliva. No Tony, no peace. Same with Dale Murphy. Deal with them and then talk to me about Joe freaking Carter. Bunch of bushers. I'm out. I'm done. I'm bitter again on this topic.
Bring us home on it, Gary. So I don't want the
I think he this is the New York bias. This is going to be a very interesting vote too, because certainly a lot of the people that are going to be asked to vote on him, he treated like absolute crap. Yeah. So I think it's going to be borderline with him. I do think that he brought the New York market and the Yankees back to prominence. But his body of work to me is questionable. Other than signing Jackson and Hunter and Sparky Lyle and all those guys, and after 81, they went through a stretch where they weren't really competitive at all because of his financial bunglings. So, and then, when they got good in the 90s again, it sounds awful, but he was already struggling with his own physical problems, and he had some good executives like Cashman in place that were straightening the organization back out again. So, beyond his blustering personality, beyond the fact of New York bias, beyond the fact that he did, in an era where the game was struggling a little bit at that time with popularity too versus football and some other stuff and putting it on the map, his body of work in leading that organization, he bought the most valuable franchise in baseball anyway, and it stayed that way. He didn't triple it or quadruple it or anything else, and he certainly had a ton of missteps in terms of Oscar Gambles and Dave Collins of the world, and, in the 80s, they pretty much stunk most of it. So, I think his body of work, to me, is the reason that he would not be in for me, beyond all the other blustering, because I don't really think it's all that good. I think a lot of people could have done a lot better. Fletch hits the nail on the head. If you want to start rewarding the business of baseball, Miller and Selig and guys like that deserve to be in long before this guy does. So
absolutely, and as I said, I don't think he hangs on to such turning into star minor league prospects if he's not suspended. So it negates one of the great eras of New York Yankee baseball.
Yep.
So to me, that keeps him out. But we'll get off that. We'll go into the. Will it make you happier to go into the big moments of the week, Fletch?
Oh, I'm feeling better now. I'm sorry, I had to get that bitterness out. I had to let it out.
Hey, man. we'll start. I'm going to try to make you feel much better by letting you go first with your big moment of the week.
Well, guys, let's talk perfection. And in the Steelers' ass-whooping of the Carolina Panthers, you have to say it was evident in the play of one Ben Roethlisberger. You know, for the fourth time in his Hall of Fame career, he put up a perfect passer rating of 158.3. So I don't know if you guys know the math behind this, but to qualify for that rating, the quarterback must attempt, I believe, at least 10 passes, have 0 interceptions, minimum of 77.5% completion percentage, just under 12% of his touchdown passes, or his passes go for touchdown, and 12.5 yards per attempt. So what do they say? Well, you know, with that game, Ben joins Peyton Manning as the only quarterback to have 4 of those games. And here are the other ones who had multiple ones. Kurt Warner had 3. Tom Brady has 2. And this is going to blow your mind completely. The other people with 2? Craig Morton. Go figure that one. David Craig, and Dave, your favorite, Kenny O'Brien.
Interesting group.
Kenny O'Brien, certainly one of the great draft picks of all time.
He was part of the greatest draft
first
class.
round.
Yes, he was part of the '83 draft class. But yeah, I mean that's pretty remarkable. I didn't realize that Ben and Peyton were the only ones to do it 4 times.
I think that's very impressive. Very impressive for Big Ben. To boot. Gary, what was your big moment of the week?
I'm going to have an A and B again, if you don't mind. A, Thursday night, 52-17, as Fletch just said. Killing a damn good team, probably a playoff team, really wiping them out. Then you get to Saturday, and 52-21, Pitt wiping out a previously ranked team, a team that a lot of people had picked in the top 10. And the same day, I'm going to add them in there, Hines again rushes, and Duquesne wins a big game coming back in the latter part of the season against a pretty good Sacred Heart team. And they got a kid again for the 4th time or 3rd time this year, has rushed for more than 225 yards. So the moment of the week was, if you like Pittsburgh football, Thursday and Saturday were just sensational for you. And then I think my B is I'm going to go back to me, when I start to think about this more, in any professional sport, the best player by far in their professional sport, you guys are lucky enough to see on a regular basis, it's number 87 for Pittsburgh. On a team that's reeling, loses 5 straight games, first time under Sullivan since he's there, Crosby has a game for the ages. Not only does he put the damn puck in an inch over a 6'5" goalie's left shoulder on the full rush, then he sets up the very next 2 minutes later with a perfect pass across the thing to tip in. And the other 2 goals, you're lucky enough to see it. He busts his rear end to get into play, pulls the defense and the wingers with him. So they scored 2 other goals, one on the power play and one even strength. The guy's the best player in the world. His moment of the week is the fact that in a team that, quite frankly, I think is going to be a lot better even than people think, particularly if they can get some size up front and one more on the defense and Murray can get righted. Just to watch the guy play, that's got to be a moment of the week every single time, 82 times. So those are my moments of the week, Dave.
All right. Well, I certainly one of mine, a contender for mine, was last night, playing a fast Illinois-Chicago team, our vaunted Dukes, down by 11 with 3 minutes left, fought back, down by 4 with seconds left. Sincere Carey, who is going to be a name we're going to be saying quite a bit, I believe scored 32 points last night, scores the last 4 to send it into overtime. A team of character, not at their best. And this team is going to be, it's probably going to be a little bit before they start meshing together, but that shows me a lot of him and Dan Brott not allowing them to lose on a night they weren't playing well. But the thing I liked about Carey is to show sometimes how the whole recruiting process is flawed. This is a kid who took a scholarship from West Liberty.
Yeah.
And Dan Brott saw something in him that he got pumped up about. So he gets him to be released from his West Liberty scholarship. so he can come to Duquesne. That's not exactly a guy you're going to look at to be the foundation of your program. But in his second game in a Duke uniform, he tosses in 32 points and just has a sequence that's unbelievable to bring him back to victory. A guy who was a West Liberty recruit. I thought that was good. But today, something just pissed me off. That certainly even more than the whole Maryland debacle of the last couple of weeks. But the thing that really got to me today was Tom Wilson, a man who shouldn't be allowed to play a game, a guy who in a league where the Players Association is going after Bettman because of CT, because of head injuries, turn around and defend this asshole to get his suspension reduced. You know what? I mean, you can't whine about injuries in one end and protecting the players and turn around and a guy who has caused so many senseless injuries by his just incredibly asinine play, turn around, defend him, and, he ends up winning the appeal. Just ended up pissing me off. And in true NHL fashion, they reduced his suspension by 6 games to 14, but Washington's already played 16 games, so I'm not quite sure what the arbiter was coming up with there, but obviously his math isn't at the top level. But I can't even begin to tell you how irritated I was, not only at this, but that the Players Association was appealing it also. I mean, you guys are hockey guys. How'd that make you feel?
You want to go, Fletcher, or you want me to go?
It's yours, dear.
I think the biggest problem, Dave, is the league itself. When Shanahan, they've had a bunch of boobs in that job, that discipline job. When Shanahan, who was a very fine player, could be a little bit on the edge player himself, had the job, the consistency started to come to it. And you didn't have a situation like this where you could even go to an arbitrator.
Yeah.
He was a good enough player, and he had enough respect, I guess, under Bettman to do it. I'm not sure he's in that job now, but they've had some idiots in there like Pronger, who's one of the biggest violators in league history of the rules, flaunting the rules. Yeah. The league creates its own headache. I mean, if there's no head hits, then there's no head hits, and if there's substantial over-the-line head hits, then the suspension should be long. But the problem is they set no precedent. Lemieux was a whiner to me about this stuff, but he was right. It is a garage league. Get the thing under control. Get somebody in there, have facts that you can make a better argument. And if you don't, you're going to have this kind of egregious stuff going on. So, I mean, you suspend Torres 1 year for 41 games. And then, you suspend Wilson for 20, and then some other stuff that's horrendous, you suspend a guy for 3 games. You can't do stuff like that. It's got to be a lot more even discipline. So the league itself is part of the problem here, not just Tom Wilson, and to me. Yeah. And I think until they get somebody in that job and they get some kind of agreement on it, the players always speak out of both sides of their mouth, and no different in the NHL. Those guys don't want to give any of the former players much money either, similar to what the NFL problem has been, similar to what it's been in the other professional sports. So I don't have a lot of sympathy for them either. Yeah. But I think the league, the league probably got away pretty cheap here, from what it sounds like to me, and it's about 200. It's not a big number to the players that were part of the suit. Yeah. And I think they were lucky this time. But I think going forward, both the way the world's changed and everything else, they better get control of this stuff, because you can't just decide one time I'm going to do it one way and another time do another way. It makes you look bad in the sports press, too. So Wilson's not particularly likable. He's not the only one. And I think that it has to be a lot more consistent. I think they've managed to take away the slashes on the hands and the wrists with the rules. You can do this too. It takes a few years to get there. But when there is discipline that needs to be handed out, make sure it's quick, decisive, and consistent. And if you don't, you're going to continue to have this problem, in my view.
And don't get me wrong. It's great that they took away the broken hand, but I'd rather have a broken hand than, permanent brain injury from some asshole who can't understand why it's wrong what he's doing.
I mean, he's a headhunter, and the hit on Sundquist was a bad one.
Yeah.
He deserved a big one, and I think to send the message that we're not going to have this kind of stuff. But 20, to me, they didn't really have a lot of precedent for that, other than Rafi Torres, who had 41 games and was a much more egregious offender than Wilson was.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they really didn't have a precedent for that, other than they were trying to send a message. The trouble is that there's other things that go on. They are lessening. I mean, I think if we're honest about this, they are lessening, and the game's changing a great deal. But I also think, beyond the consistency of it, too, you're going to have some injuries sometimes that are going to happen because of the speed of the game and the way the game's played today that you're not going to be able to regulate against. But the trouble is, if it's a hit to the head and you're called with a 5-minute major or something like that, Malkin's hit on Oshie was not good either, but it certainly wasn't of the same egregious nature. But he should have gotten something, let's face it. And he didn't.
I think there should have been a fine there. I agree with you.
Yep. So, I mean, the league itself is the problem. So, and I think you need a guy like Shanahan. You need a guy that's played the game, I think, and not some jackass like Pronger, who, hit people in the head 55 times in his career. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You need somebody who was a good player like Shanahan, who was a tough player like a Messier who could play hard, but understood what was above the line and what's below the line. And I think that's the problem you have in the Wilson situation. So,
Fletch.
Repeat offender, no consistency with the league, and you find out why they rank fourth in North American major sports.
And
I think that's pretty much
the MLS. They're fifth.
There's a fact. Yep.
So we'll go to our prediction of the week, Gary.
My weakest area. I think. I'm going to take a really simple softball here. I think Pitt's going to continue their role here this weekend against Wake. Even though Wake did have a good win, as you say, Dave, against a pretty good North Carolina State team. I'm not sure Pitt's going to whip them 52-22, but I think it's going to be a pretty good performance. They're going to be rolling into that Thanksgiving weekend. That's my prediction for this weekend.
Love hearing it, Mr. Fletcher.
You guys know I really fall for the hype, but this time it's hard to resist. The Rams versus Chiefs, two of the best teams this season. But here's the thing. We've had a lot of on-paper great games that turned out to be stinkers. Take, for example, the Steelers-Panthers. We're supposed to be a pick-em, and we all saw what happened there. Unfortunately, I think we're going to see the same thing here. I think it's not going to be the classic matchup we're all hoping for. I mean, already there's questions about that. They're moving the game from Mexico City to L.A. because of the field.
Right.
Now, I feel bad for the Rams. When they sent them out to Colorado Springs to train in the high altitude to get ready. Now they're probably all looking at each other like, what the hell are we doing in Colorado Springs now? So the NFL just can't catch a break on these matchup games.
No.
And I predict that I will be tuned out by halftime, and I'm going to be headed to YouTube to watch an old episode of This Week in Football, which, by the way, guys, you can do, and you can see Tom Brookshire in all of his glory. I just discovered this. I didn't know did you guys know that you can watch these old shows? Oh, yes.
I didn't know that.
Purple.
I'm going to say it's going to be an ugly game. I'm not sure who's going to win, and I hope that doesn't make me a busher, but I think that it's not going to be the game that the league was hoping for.
All right, you're not going to make a call? You're not going to make a call on this one?
I'm not making a call. I have no feeling for it. I just know I just don't think it's going to be entertaining. I think one of these two teams is going to beat the shit out of the other one.
Well, let me add two things there. Two thoughts I have. Goff's every bit as good as Wentz, but because he doesn't play in Philadelphia, he doesn't get the same press. I mean, I'm getting fed up with hearing how wonderful this guy is helping old ladies across the street, which is a crock of crap because I know somebody that's involved with the Maxwell Football Club here. Goff is every bit as good. He took a lot of criticism at the beginning. It's not because I'm a Ram fan. He just is. And I don't know. I have no faith in Reed when the chips. Reed can win in the regular season. It's a big game or a playoff game. He has a tendency. He looks at that piece of plastic all the time. And you can see his mouth quivering. I kind of think I think you're right, Fletch. I think it's going to be a blowout, but I think the Rams are going to be the one to blow them out. I really do.
I'm hoping they wear the blue and white, though, Gary.
Yeah, I mean, I like the yellows. I like the ones this weekend again too. But I agree with you, Fletch. I'm with the white horns and and the blue on the shoulders. They did that early part of the year, and I'd go back to those. I agree with you fully.
All right. I am personally going with the alma mater, playing for the NAC championship this week against Central Connecticut. Winner takes the NCAA FCS bid with it. And, the Dukes, in my mind, should have been to quite a few NCAA tournaments instead of just the one so far. Usually blowing this last game of the season to lose the Northeast Conference. But they're going to travel to Central Connecticut. Central Connecticut probably has been the better team all year. But this Duke team, to me, playing a little better defense than maybe some in the past. In this position only because they played a Bryant team that they should have beaten. They lost by 1 point after the tragic death of one of their teammates. A tough game to play. But I'm going to say that they're going to come across with a big win in Connecticut this week. It's going to be a close game. I think they're going to win by 3 points. But I think the Dukes are. This is probably one of the better overall Duke teams of the great streak of that they've played since joining the Northeast Conference, and I say they're going to come home with an NCAA bid, and we're going to be buying Northeast Conference championship shirts at the bookstore. That's my prediction.
Wow. Nice.
It's a good team, Dave. I mean, Parr's. You can see why Parr played Division I football. And this past weekend. Bad weather, freezing. They could beat you a lot of different ways. They could pound the ball inside because Hines is not the biggest guy height-wise, but he's wide as a boxcar. And they got two receivers. They got this little guy Crawford, who's a speed guy, and then they got the big guy, I can't remember, Kellen something. His name's escaped me now, number 5. But
Kellen Taylor, who had
they can beat you a lot of ways.
Had a great game last week, and certainly he'll be on the Dukes basketball team once they get through 2 rounds of the playoffs. That's another prediction later. But yeah, no, you're right. You got to see him last week, Gary, in the cold, and that was the best team.
And I think defensive backfield as well. I mean, this kid Meacham for Sacred Heart was also an excellent runner, a hard runner, not a big guy. They had trouble with him, but other than that, I mean, their defensive backfield is very athletic. Yeah. Now they can control the line of scrimmage. I mean, I'm just thankful for the fact that whether Schmidt stays or not, or whatever his long-term plans are, they clearly got this going the right way. Like we always talk about in college sports, a lot of these kids that are not going to get looked at by a Pitt or a Penn State, but are damn good football players, particularly out in that region, all the way to Columbus, probably to Harrisburg. Got kids from all over. Harrisburg, looking at the roster, Harrisburg, Jersey, Virginia, Florida. I mean, it's just that things are going the right way, just like the basketball program. And I agree with you, Dave, on the basketball program. I mean, this is the deepest Dukes team, it looks like, in terms of athletic talent we've seen in quite a while, basketball-wise, watching them last night and the other night, watching the tape of the William and Mary thing. We go 10, 11 deep. We haven't seen that, quite frankly, since we were all starting there in the early 80s. So,
it's just going to take a little bit of time till they gel. They're all new together. I mean, so and
our alma mater is going the right way in these 2 games, these 2 bigger games, for sure.
It is.
No doubt.
And Fletcher is going to go see an NCAA basketball playoff game in the next, let's say, 15 months. Are you looking forward? Do you believe in that, Fletch? Are you diving in? Are you going?
I'm ready to drink the Kool-Aid. And Gary, I'm also excited about the Dukes football team having some legacies from Harrisburg. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, I mean, those Harrisburg men are great men, so, you got to have a couple of them.
There you go.
I mean, recruiting there is something that when I was there, you never saw. Everybody was from the Pittsburgh area.
Yeah.
So getting kids to come from these other places. I mean, I think all these apps and stuff have done a tremendous amount for football programs like Duquesne or Central Connecticut or Sacred Heart or even Robert Morris, because you can see the kid play. And if you see the program's going pretty good, that kid's going to think, hey, I might do that. I might do that now. Whereas before it wouldn't have happened at all. So either with the coach or with the ability to see it. So, I don't know. I mean, I'm glad, you know. I mean, that can mean a lot of money to the school.
Yeah.
So they're going to need to do something about the ballpark they play in. But other than that, a lot of things are going the right way. So
luckily, as part of the, as I'm looking, I got my mail today begging for money to pay for the Cooper Field house. But looking at the brochure they sent out, Rooney Field is part of the overall reconstruction of the campus over the next 5 to 10 years. Sounds like they are going to try to increase the attendance, put a wall on the backside, and try to make it a little more of a stadium. But, to me, all they need to do is go over the damn hill and go to Highmark Stadium, which for that level would be a very
I'm with you, Dave. I'm with you.
Good field.
Yep.
All right, gentlemen. I'll bid you adieu for tonight until next week. We'll talk to you then.
Nice evening, gentlemen.
All right, guys.
All right.
The proceeding was a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production. Thank you for listening.